I believe personally, just based off of my research, and I've gone through now over 1,000 scriptures, texts, papyruses, cuneiform tablets from all over the world. They all have a very similar story. And all these ancient civilizations talk about beings, not just beings who came here from other planets, people that look like us and we look like them. In other words, not identical, but very similar. In other words, a bilateral, bipedal hominid of some type that can maneuver around, that has appendages that can manipulate the environment, because without that, you can't move out into space and other places. And they also talk about multidimensional. You get into like the Nag-Hammadi and stuff like that. You're talking about multidimensional beings. And so in physics, in quantum physics in particular, they started theorizing on these dimensions and were able to even analyze and discover some that they actually do exist. And on top of that, they realized that the dimensions are packed so tight on top of one another that if you can phase shift your atomic structure, your subatomic frequency, you can walk right into another dimension. And so they started postulating, what if beings from higher dimensions or some of these apparitions and these paranormal phenomena that we're seeing, are they able to maybe take a glimpse or a peek? Are they phasing through into our universe? And so from higher dimensions. And so they started really theorizing it. It seems to be, and based on my research, that there's people living everywhere. Not just, and I'm not talking about little green men with antenna. I think that there's people living all throughout this universe in the third dimension. And I think there's people living all throughout even higher multiple dimensions, maybe at a certain level, at a certain height in those dimensions. Maybe they don't have a real corporeal body.
Right, non-physical.
Non-physical, you know what I'm saying? But I believe that the consciousness is there. Well, I'm actually an amateur astronomer.
Okay.
I've been doing that for a long time.
Yes, sir.
You know, I have a real nice telescope. I have a Celestron SLR, and it's a real nice telescope. You can actually see the rings of Saturn. You can see Jupiter. You can see Mars.
Yeah.
I took a famous picture that's been circulating for years of Mars during the summer. When you take a picture of Mars during the summer, it actually has green, it has blues. It's not a red planet. You can see that the ice caps are smaller, which means they've melted. There's a lot of liquid water on the planet. And a lot of those greens, I believe, is vegetation. You know, and now all the science data is coming back out from NASA. Now, all of a sudden, press releases are coming out. The soil on Mars is better for growing crops than on Earth. Now they're saying there's billions of tons of liquid water on Mars now.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
I can believe that.
And they're also talking about the fact that there's an atmosphere that is the equivalent to being like 18,000 feet above sea level, but that's like going to Peru. I'm going to Peru in a few weeks, right? So same thing. You got to acclimate to that height, to that low oxygen, but you can still breathe as long as you stay close to the ground. Once you go higher up, it's going to be very dangerous. But if you're within like 10 feet of the ground, you can actually breathe. You just need to acclimate. So all of a sudden, all this is coming out because why? They're getting ready to, you know, to build an infrastructure up there, in my opinion, and do a breakaway civilization. That's what the whole Elon Musk and all that's on Mars is all about. So I got really into it. Now, one of the reasons why I built the underground shelter that you mentioned, called Fort Terra Nova, that was back in 2012, was because I was analyzing the precession of the equinoxes, the movement of the stars across the sky, the constellations across the sky. I noticed that they were speeding up. Based on my calculations, it was moving, instead of 27,000 years for one cycle, it was actually averaging around 25,000. And I'm like, are the books wrong? Are these great astronomers wrong, or what's going on? And the more I dug into it, the more I looked into it, I realized the only thing that can explain this is if our sun is orbiting something. It would need breakaway speed. And it would, you know, it would speed up and it would slow down, speed up and slow down. So I started digging into that. I found out that they had something they were calling nemesis out there, something that they couldn't exactly say what it was, but they were saying there was a huge object out there orbiting our sun, and our sun was orbiting it. And they found it about 3 or 4 years ago. They labeled it Planet 9, but really is a brown dwarf star. They found a brown dwarf orbiting our sun. So we live in a binary solar system. We don't have one sun, we actually have two. One's a brown dwarf, which you can only see with 2-mass infrared mode on your telescope. You have to have a digital scope to see that because it's so dim, you can't see with the naked eye.
Is the sun black or white?
The sun is white. It's bright white, so it's not black actually. If you actually were able to go out and look at the sun above the atmosphere, you'll find out that it's actually bright white light. When it hits our atmosphere, it scatters, and when the light breaks down, we see more of the yellows because the blues are kept up there. So The sun actually is bright white. The sun is 8 light minutes away from Earth. So if the sun went dark right now, we'd have daylight for 8 minutes. Now the light,
And that's 90 million miles away.
90 million miles away, right? And the light that's formed on the inside from the collision of the atoms on the inside, the nuclei, when they're colliding and splitting, that light doesn't go straight from the center core right out to the outside of the sun. It actually meanders through the inside of the sun for thousands and thousands of years before it releases itself and leaves the corona. Then it takes 8 minutes to get to Earth. So the light that we're experiencing right now is hundreds of thousands of years old before it even got to us. You know what I'm saying? Before it left our sun.
By Compendium of the Emerald Tablets by Billy Carson.